My fellow Americans, this is your president, Kyone Wolf, with a special announcement. As many of you know, cyclonic waterspouts containing deadly sharks have been striking the eastern seaboard today. I'm probably a little late in making this announcement because some people on my staff take what I say a little too literally.
You said you wanted to binge watch The L Word and not to disturb you under any circumstances.
First of all, we're live, so don't interrupt me. Second, I meant don't disturb me for boring stuff you can handle on your own. Use your common sense. Of course I want to know about a Sharknado. Anyway, my fellow Americans, this crisis will test the very core of who we as a nation can be. What would Thomas Jefferson have said at a time like this? He would have said, "Eat my slaves, not me." Hey, who put that in the teleprompter?
It's true. Jefferson was a total creep about stuff like that.
Yeah, but there are sharks on the mall. There are sharks on Faneuil Hall. There are sharks inside the Empire State Building. People don't want a big debate about historical relativism. Anyway, my fellow Americans, I want to assure you that I will be working hard to forge a treaty with these sharks. I am sure they can be Who put that in the teleprompter?
Madam President, I think it's important not to be totally negative about the sharks. They've been on this planet much longer than we have. We need to show them that it's possible to coexist.
Coexist? They ate my mother. They ate my vice president. They ate my vice president's mother. My fellow Americans, run to your garages and start up your chainsaws and hack and kill and slice and rip. Kill them all. Kill all the sharks. This is totally a good time to panic and overreact. It's a freaking Sharknado, people.
What if we could get them to go over to K Street and eat all the lobbyists?
Is that possible? I like the way you're thinking. My fellow Americans, I need time to confer with my advisors. We now rejoin the Kardashians. Or if you have Netflix, I totally recommend The L Word. Or you could listen to The Nose. And now he's wearing shark-proof Depends, Colin McEnroe.
It's just a precaution. I was laughing a lot during the intro. I mean, I wrote the intro, but I was because I know where the screaming sound effect comes from. Maybe I'll mention it during the endorsements. I don't know. No, I'll mention it right now. There's this thing on Japanese television. I don't know whether this is like the whole reality show. Japan, although I love Japan, I've been there, I think it's a great place, but sometimes it seems like Tosh 4.0 pretending to be a country. So there's this thing where there's like this person gets put in this big, huge plastic cube, and then they let a bear out, and the bear just like tips the cube over and tries to get to the person and stuff, and the person's screaming inside the plastic cube. And it just kind of goes on like that. So that's where we get the screaming. The person.
Wow, but it's closed, so the
bear can't. It doesn't end with the bear getting the person, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
No, that's not how it ends. No, it's just, the person is apparently in no actual danger, but this huge bear is just like tipping over the cube and hitting it with his paws and stuff like that. So, and the person's screaming. All right, so that's neither here nor there. We're not even talking about Sharknado today. We're getting sidetracked and we haven't even started. Let me tell you who's on the show right now. Well, you've just heard Irene Papoulis ask a very pertinent question. She is a professor at Trinity College. James Hanley also with us. He is the big cheese at Trinity Cine Studio. He's the big cheese and the small cheese and the medium-sized cheese. He's all the kinds of cheese that there is at Trinity Cine Studio.
Thank you, Colin.
And then Carolyn Payne. I could list all of her accomplishments. I could list everything that she does, but maybe it would be easier just to say Carolyn Payne is an entertainer. And what are you doing at the slot tournament?
I'm hosting the slot tournament tonight at Foxwoods Casino.
Right. So if you don't get enough of Carolyn Payne during the nose today, which is quite possible, you can just run down to which casino?
Foxwoods.
All right. And you're probably planning to go to the slot tournament anyway, but so it just makes it better for you, really. All right. So we're going to begin with a kind of a mini crisis in journalism. Most people probably at some point or other, if you're the type of person who likes to surf around and read a lot of free journalism, you might have looked at Gawker. Gawker often does break really interesting stories. The stories tend to be muckraking and very heavy on muck, but they sometimes are quite interesting and quite important. However, last Thursday, I believe it was, Gawker broke a story that really didn't seem all that important. It involved an executive from Condé Nast. It was somebody that nobody would have ever heard of. It involved that person's possible solicitation of a gay paid escort. And it seemed like an unnecessary exposure of somebody's private life. At least it seemed to many people like that. So Gawker management actually wound up deciding to take the post down. Now, keep in mind, Gawker has this kind of reputation as this real disruptive or maybe an engine of disruption, a media site that takes a certain amount of pride in tackling the kinds of stories that other media sites aren't, and they feel as though, in their most self-righteous moments, that they're kind of speaking truth to power. Anyway, in the context of all that, two of the editors, after the removal of the post, two of the editors resigned. There was an outcry from the staff, and there was sort of a claim that the business side of the staff was intervening. It was compared by one person to the Reichstag fire. That might have been a little bit of hyperbole. But anyway, so I sort of thought this was going to go away because we were talking about this on our staff, I think last Friday or maybe on Monday, and I just sort of felt like this is going to die down. And then it didn't. It's still the subject of conversation. It's still the subject of debate. A lot of questions about sort of whether or not ultimately a lot of the new disruptive forms of journalism are going to seem like the old, not so disruptive forms of journalism, or whether, in fact, this is just Gawker finally realizing that not every garbage can needs to be tipped over. So Irene Papoulis, I'll just ask you open-endedly, where do your thoughts go? What do you make of all this?
Yeah, well, my first of all, I think it's funny that the guy is always referred to as someone you would never have heard of and who's not important, right. But so my first thought was to be sympathetic to the guy that took the piece down because it seems really inappropriate. But then, but that sort of contradicts my belief that the editors should have the final word and the guy who's in charge should not be able to censor what the editors put out. And then that made me think about Gawker in general and the whole purpose of Gawker and the whole purpose of, why do we go on to Gawker? And the whole idea that there's information online that we're not going to get in mainstream sources. And so I'm interested in that issue. I'm not, I just think it's kind of a vexing issue because I love Gawker. I love going to find out the real, dirt, quote unquote, for various stories. So, but is there a line? I mean, I think there is a line, but then when I hear myself thinking that, I think, well, maybe there shouldn't be a line, or why is there a line, or what do I think about that? I'm not quite sure.
All right, you can call us and tell us where the line is at 860-2757-266. That's 860-2757-266. You may also draw the line and then make a picture of it and put it on Twitter. Our Twitter account is WNPR Colin. Greg Hill is our tweet master. So Carolyn, I'll kind of let you go next. I mean, Gawker is one of the guilty pleasures, and we like the idea that Gawker is shooting at the feet of the powerful, right?
Yeah, I mean, Gawker is primary news source for me, I'm sad to say. Maybe it's the snarky millennial in me, but I mean, when I will sooner read Gawker than I will New York Times, usually. I mean, for certain things. I mean, just the name Gawker totally is open about what it's trying to do. Incidentally, I just read this morning that they are rebooting the website this coming Monday, and they're potentially even changing the name. So I'm interested in seeing
such a great name.
I know. So I'm interested in seeing what they do. But I think that it is it's the valuable part of what we have with kind of this world where almost everyone is a journalist, and all of these sites offering news in quotation marks. I think that it's good to have a site sometimes that is the catfish is in there like stirring it up.
All right, and so James. Well, James, I'll just let you react any way you want. Why should I sit?
Well, I'm very much sort of dyed-in-the-wool agitator and have been since I was sort of first like getting politically aware, and it's very tempting. I mean, the idea of Gawker is great, as as Caroline was pointing out about the being able to pick up immediately on the day and find out things that are going on, particularly amongst powerful people who are probably trying to hide something bad that they're doing. And all of that is good. But part of the problem, I think, is something that afflicts the Internet generally, which is that when you take something that is essentially a matter of investigative journalism, say, figuring out what's going on with something, you can put a whole lot of stuff up and throw up a whole lot of stuff that you've heard without checking, and all sorts of stuff can come out. And it's interesting for people to read. But there's the other side of it, which is that the operation of Gawker also has a sizable commercial responsibility to its advertisers and to people. You know, it's a business. It's a big business. And so it starts to be complicated when you do that. I mean, if you're I.F. Stone, the journalist I.F. Stone, sitting at home and sort of, going after some banker or something like that who's done something, this was sort of a world of the past, and obviously that paradigm doesn't work in a complicated internet-driven universe. But at the same time, I'm kind of sensitive to the idea of some sort of sense that you have to know what you're talking about when you go after somebody. You better know exactly what they're doing, number one. But also, if you're, say, for instance, you're outing somebody. I've been a member of lots of organizations that over the years, one of the principal things was dealing with politicians who, should you out a politician, for instance, who is gay and supportive under the cover, but then goes out in the newspaper and says something really provocatively anti-gay, and obviously to shield him or herself. And under those circumstances, I mean, the principle I always felt was, okay, if somebody is indulging in public hypocrisy, yes, nail them, but because they're really lying and they're using their public position to subvert something that affects other people's lives. However, if you get into a situation where you're outing somebody because you've heard it, and it's entertaining to do that, I think that's a more dangerous place to be. And when it's also driven by commercial needs, I think Gawker's in a very difficult position like that. If it were sort of smaller, it's appealing to think of these things as being small, sort of like operations where people, diehard journalists are really determined to get the facts right and go after the right people. I think there's a great danger with a large operation like Gawker is that it makes a lot of noise that distracts people from the real damage that's being done, by maybe bankers who have gotten huge public payoffs who end up working for the SEC or something like that, which is the real issue, I think.
Well, interestingly, the business part of this is working a little bit differently than the way we might typically think of it working. So I think our overall model our overall idea of the business model of something like Gawker is that the more tawdry and extreme and reckless and boundless they are, the better things are, the more that they have to sell, the more sizzle that they've got. But the way that this has been explained anyway, and the way it seems to be being explained inside Gawker, it's more as though the business side of Gawker has thought, we're starting to hit a ceiling right now in terms of doing that stuff. And in terms of actual valuation, they're looking over, I don't know why, but Vox is the site that keeps coming up. And Vox is valued right now at $400 million. And the accusation by the editors has been that Nick Denton, the guy who founded Gawker and this whole empire of other websites that goes along with Gawker, is looking around and thinking, well, so we're too mean. We're too mean and we're too reckless and at a certain point, not only will we not achieve respectability, but we won't achieve the kind of market valuation that I would really like unless we can play a little bit nicer. So, I find that sort of interesting that the editors who are complaining are well, one of the editors mockingly described a, quote, brand book that Denton had commissioned in the past as sort of a mission statement for the company. Quote, we reveal what's really happening without restraint, inhibition, or ulterior motives, that brand book says. We're fearless in sharing our own perspectives, regardless of how unconventional, unpopular, or unexpected they may be. We tell the real story. And now Nick Denton, the guy who sort of presided over this empire, is kind of backing away from that because he feels as though there's only so far you can go with that.
It's kind of, it is. I think it is really interesting. I'm thinking about WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks that they have a moral. I think, at least the way I see it, there's sort of they have a reason to put all these documents out there and all these facts out there. So in a way, we want to have it both. Like we want to have we want to have certain information, but I feel like on some level, don't we want to have the person that's giving the information have a pretty good reason for it? Besides just let's just out this guy because we found out this thing about him. You want to have a sense that there's a thinking, moral person behind it, even if they're being disruptive and irreverent. That they have a good reason for it. So, and maybe that's what brings the money in. To to the site.
I think the problem is, can that really happen? I mean, because it happens so fast now on the internet that if something comes in, Gawker or any other site, whether it's Vox or any of the others, if something comes in, they're going to run with it. There's going to be a lot of pressure, shall we say, to run with it, because if you wait, somebody else will get it, and probably somebody who's not going to consider as much as you do about maybe, should we do this or shouldn't we do this? And so it's driven by different things.
But I guess that's where the problem is with this particular case is, would anyone else have run with this?
Yeah.
So I think that's
true.
What makes it interesting is why this? That's what I was having a lot of trouble wrapping my head around. And I know that's their game is to be the first and to get in there and and
then deal with the consequences later.
Exactly.
And essentially try and take a kind of high ground, which I think is also problematic, because if it's something like somebody's personal thing, like for instance this particular case with a guy getting a male escort, it's salacious and it's something that grabs page views, and it's something guaranteed to get a response. It's just gotten a different response from what they expected. And you've got everything turned on its head, where editors are sort of, they're resigning because this is now being, concealed, as it were, or being put back in the box.
What they thought, too, because, if it's really a guy that he works for Condé Nast, but nobody's really heard of him, why would that even be interesting? Some guy did this.
Here's what I think. First of all, okay, go ahead.
Well, no, I'm just agreeing with what...
Well, here's what I think about this. First of all, yes, it's interesting to watch the people on Slate Culture Gabfest tackle this. I was listening to them talk about it last night and realizing that we probably should too. And Julia Turner said the editors who were resigning were talking about this like it was the Pentagon Papers, which it clearly is not. But I think Gawker's point is, or the people who are extreme about this sort of say, if you start having too many conversations about should we do this, you really are going down the, forgive me for the cliche, slippery slope, where sooner or later you arrive at the point where Bill Cosby is sort of the best example to hang out there. There's even a Bill Cosby story up on Gawker today about what do you get, the Quaaludes from a gynecologist or something, and so what we don't want is a situation where Bill Cosby can fly below the radar, for decades and decades, and everybody kind of knows about this, or people kind of know about it, and then it takes this kind of totally non-credentialed journalistic source. I believe your colleague, Hannibal Buress, is the guy who brought this out, and then suddenly there's this conversation going that really should have happened a long time ago. And so I think Gawker looks at the established legacy media and says that's where you guys wound up, where you just couldn't really appropriately tackle the Bill Cosby thing and would back down from it. We've seen videos of Cosby just backing down, various credentialed journalists, because in fact you don't have this, épouter la bourgeoisie attitude that we have, where we're just not going to run it through filters. We're just going to put it out there so we don't start asking ourselves all these dangerous questions.
I think that's a really good thing, and it's something we need. But the problem is that when you break something as big as the Cosby story, for example, and you that becomes burned into the public consciousness over maybe 3 or 4 days, then there's an expectation. What's next? And there's a great sort of pressure to come up with something.
Feed me.
Well,
Feed me,
anytime
exactly.
You're breaking a story like that, I know in Hannibal's case, when he said that, he became a person that then other people were attacking him heavily, and it was very hard on him.
Yeah.
Yes, that's kind of what happens sometimes in revealing the truth, or saying something that you believe to be the truth. You're going to face the consequences, and you have to live up to it. In Gawker's case, with this particular story and with their history of what they do, I think that them kind of backing down and saying, well, we're going to rebrand now and shift, I'm kind of disappointed in them in some way. Like I said, I think that it's a rough thing if they're going to
I totally agree.
change who they are.
The very nature of changing your name, isn't that like sort of like, oh my God, the
going into witness protection?
Yeah, right, exactly. And the value of the enterprise, as it were, is now being threatened. So we have to change its name, which is complete hypocrisy to me, in the sense that if you really believe in this stuff and you believe in doing this, then you run a slightly edgier operation, and you don't suddenly decide, okay, you've got to rebrand yourself. I mean, what is rebranding? Rebranding is like, when you've had the poison in your aspirin or something like that, and so you've got to do something about it. So you give it a new look and put it in a new box. But this is something entirely different. I mean, you're talking about something that ultimately is a journalistic responsibility that is no longer taken over by no longer taken on by large newspapers or news media, because the news media is all bought and paid for. So it means that this sort of thing is really important, and I think it really, if you stick with it, but you do have to have some sort of editorial function, I think. So the
minute you say that, you're sort of, I mean, I guess...
That's the responsibility of being... I mean, they have the potential to take over the responsibility of being a muckraking journal, if you like. But if you're going to be a muckraking journal, you better be able to actually run that kind of operation and not try to pretend it's some sort of commercial operation that, oops, all of a sudden, you did something wrong.
I think you can set the bar in various places, but you have to have a bar and you have to set it,
you
right?
Have to have a bar, yeah.
I mean, this comes up, it's come up in my career all the time. There are stories right now that we have here at WNPR, which we are sitting on because they don't clear the bar. And in fact, I was approached within the last 2 weeks about a Republican politician who's not out. This person claims to have maybe even had a gay relationship with this person. And then he says, well, this person's really sort of a bully on gay issues. And my response was, the bar for this is going to be very high for me. First of all, I have no evidence that he is a hypocrite or a bully. I mean, maybe he is. If I start to find that'll change. That'll move it closer to the bar that it has to clear for me. But I sort of do believe that people are entitled to private lives until their private lives really do encroach on their public responsibilities and reveal them to be less than sincere and genuine. But my standard for proof of that is high because I really do place some kind of value on people's privacy. And Gawker can say, our bar is much lower. And I also have another set of questions like, who are you? Why do you want to tell me this? Like in the case of this Gawker story, there's some whole Obama-related subplot that I don't understand. One person's an Obama. The person who approaches you with a story like this, you want to know, like, why are you here with this story? Right. I mean,
exactly.
That's an important question to me too.
So, and are you, Colin? So you're comfortable with Gawker having a lower bar than you?
Well, it doesn't matter whether I'm. Yeah.
Are you?
It doesn't matter whether I'm comfortable or not. But yeah, first of all, I am. If they want to go but they should have some bar, And like, I don't even know what bar this story cleared.
I think there's something also to do with power. I think that when people have real power, like for instance a banker who's running off with the goods, then I think that the bar is lower there because this person, if you do have the goods on this person and you know that this person is running off with the taxpayer money or is, engaging in something that is damaging and is using power to actually subvert the system and make people's lives worse, then, you do have to do some checking, of course, but then I think it's very clear that it's fair game because this person is presumably using their power to conceal what they're doing. And I mean, you look at the sort of vituperation that's visited upon somebody as prominent as Elizabeth Warren. I mean, because she's going, she's making such a strong pitch about watching bankers that a lot of those people don't like that. And so, I mean, I could say, well, if Gawker finds out stuff on stuff like that, well, yeah, I'll support what they're doing, and I think that that's a very good thing that they're doing because our newspapers are not.
So maybe everyone should kind of talk about and be explicit about what exactly their bar is. I mean, so these editors, it seems like these editors were upset because the publisher, just pulled the story without really consulting them. So if they had a conversation, it seems like such an extreme thing to say we quit, in protest for you pulling the story, as opposed to saying, let's talk about what our bar is.
Well, rage quitting is part of the fun of journalism. Anyway, we have to take a little break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about breaking up, how to break up with dead presidents, and also how Carolyn Payne will probably break up with you. Say one thing and you do another, say one thing and you do another. All right, we're back with the news. Irene Papoulis, James Hanley, Carolyn Payne are all with us. We're Of course, here in Connecticut, the land of steady habits, where nothing ever changes, nobody ever changes anything here, and if anything ever does change, it takes years and years to talk about it, except that within the last few months, there's been the beginning of a conversation about whether the Jefferson-Jackson-Bailey dinner, which is the annual really super important dinner for the state Democrats when we're at, I don't know, people like Bill Clinton show up and give speeches, or in this year's case, Elizabeth Warren shows up to give a big speech, and they raise a lot of money. And so the question was, well, is that a good name for the dinner, particularly the Jefferson and Jackson parts, Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson? And the answer turns out to be no, led by Nick Boletto, their first-year brand-new chairman, who's a very interesting guy, by the way, or turning out to be a very interesting guy. They've just decided, no, they're going to cut that tie. They're going to call it something else. They voted, in fact, to call it something else. They don't know exactly. They voted unanimously to rename the dinner. Not clear what they're going to rename it. And they've surprised America. This is sort of a low-level national story. That particularly, I think, the Thomas Jefferson part about it. Like, everybody gets the Andrew Jackson part, but the Thomas Jefferson part's kind of, you know.
Well, this made me think of, I was on the nose when we were talking about Ben Affleck being on the Ancestry TV show.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to be renamed the Affleck dinner, if that's what you're.
Probably not. No. Although if he was there, he's single now.
The Affleck Damon dinner might be nice.
But he tried to pull the episode because they found out that his ancestors had slaves, and he didn't want to deal with that and have that to face and have that a part of his public persona. And that's what this reminded me of when I was reading about this. It was like, now the state of Connecticut is like all Ben Affleck. We're all trying to hide.
So you're saying you think it's wrong to just sort of pretend that Thomas Jefferson wasn't a cherished and revered figure, slaves and all?
Yeah, I mean, it's again,
you wouldn't have made that change.
Probably not.
All
no,
right.
It's that slippery slope. Like, what else are we going to start to try to just push under the rug here?
All right. Speaking of, by the way, of our previous segment, I believe that show, that Henry Louis Gates show, they're actually they're doing like an investigation and putting a new ombudsman standard in there. So they're trying to make sure that never happens again. So, so there are those standards. All right. I always let James go last, so you get to go next.
Okay. Well, I think it's really important that it's not pushing it under the rug. It's the opposite. It's saying like Thomas Jefferson is our. We were brought up to say he was one of the founding fathers, a great guy, fantastic. The Constitution, and now to say to change the name is to say, let's look at him. Let's think about the fact that he owns slaves, and let's think about the implications of that, and let's take responsibility for not agreeing with the implications of that. So to me, it's more like, let's not just take his name off and be quiet and be hush hush and pretend he never existed, but let's just say, let's talk about him differently when we talk about the history. So that's why I think it's a great idea.
I totally agree with that. I mean, I think that if it starts a conversation, I think that's really good. I think it goes to the heart of so many things that are sort of coming to the fore about slavery. I mean, this country has never had a reckoning like South Africa or Germany with an ugly past in a real way. And I think that is coming finally after so long. And one of the things about American heroes, in quotes, I mean, Jefferson did good things. He wrote well. He had a sense of what the Constitution should be. He did many good things, but he also had another side to him, which was part of the founding of this country, which was to make slavery the economic basis of the founding of the country. And I think many Americans have not really recognized that enough in the sense of acknowledging that was the case and realizing that, for instance, if you memorialize your dinner by calling it the Jefferson dinner, that does come with some baggage, and you can have a discussion about that. And I personally, I wouldn't, if I were voting on this, I'd say, hell no, do not use his name in particular. Yes, he's done some good things. Yes, he was a founder of the country, but you don't have to swallow everything that a person does by memorializing just the name of the person as if, this is the ultimate Democrat, the ultimate father of democracy, because there was a very ugly framework to the background of human rights in terms of saying one man, one vote, and the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. All of those documents lay against a background of complete abuse of human rights. And we need to have that conversation. And if this starts a conversation amongst people in Connecticut or across the country, I think that's really great.
Although you could make the argument, first of all, I should just lay my cards on the table. I really don't like Thomas Jefferson. I think he was really much, much creepier than people understand. And at one point during this conversation, Rosa DeLauro, the congresswoman from the New Haven area, sort of said, well, she was fine with getting rid of Jackson, but her feelings about Jefferson were different. And she said it's complicated. He's complicated. And then she didn't really elaborate. Well, how is he complicated? Well, he's complicated in some of the ways that James says. But I mean, and I'd be happy to get into it, but I really do think he's kind of a terrible person. But to Carolyn's point, the other argument, and it was an argument that was mounted at Yale recently over whether to change the name of Calhoun College, an argument I got involved in somehow. The counter argument was, so let's keep the name and just talk about what does that really mean? You know, I mean, if you get rid of the name, then you're just never going to have that conversation again. You're never going to have a conversation about whether Thomas Jefferson was a creep and a hypocrite. So there's the argument for keeping the name is, I guess, your argument. Why sweep it under the rug? Why not just let it sit out there? But then you have to commit yourself, right?
Well, and it kind of, you know, again, it's that line. Where do you draw it? What about all those like Thomas Jefferson elementary schools out there? I think they addressed that in one of the articles that we read. Mm-hmm. You know, do you just keep trying to get rid of these names, or do you keep them there but keep this discussion and find other ways to move on and make this kind of make it an open book?
So many people in criticizing those decisions say, "Oh, you're just gonna blot it out. You're just gonna blot out our history." But that's not true. No. You know, I mean, no one is saying we should just blot it out. But that's always the argument. You know,
yeah. I think it's the reverse. I think that you actually bring this thing to the fore, and you sort of look at the lofty statements in the Jefferson Memorial in D.C. and talk to the tourists about complexity. Teach people about reality, because the reality is that this was a complicated man who indulged in things that were really bad. And I agree with Colin. I mean, it wasn't just his actual sort of status and what he did, but it was like highly personal things that he did that were not so admirable. And so I think
only they had Gawker back then.
Right.
Well, yeah. No kidding. No kidding.
Or there almost should be a Gawker for history, you know, that really sort of looks at people. Because, so the easy thing to say about Thomas Jefferson is, okay, at the time that he wrote, all men are created equal, he had 175 slaves. So people, that's sort of out there. That's like a latent thing. But what they don't understand is, you know, I mean, Washington freed pretty much all of his slaves in his some of his slaves were freed during the Revolution, I think, and then the rest of them freed at the time of his will. Jefferson in his will only freed 5 of his slaves, and they were the ones that were related to Sally Hemings, who, by the way, was not freed in his will. But everybody else was still stuck there, and he was punitive, too. One of the ways that he would punish slaves that he was unhappy with would be to sell them away from their families. I mean, can you imagine this? It's tough enough to be a slave, then you have a wife, you have children and stuff like that. One of the ways Jefferson would punish disobedient slaves was to sell them in a way that separated them from their families. It was that kind of thing. I think he was not a nice person. Despite engaging in miscegenation, had very negative ideas about miscegenation, particularly when it worked the other way. A white woman and a black man, and he had proposed some legislation about that. He's just a creepy guy, and just in the same sense that I think it should be called Calhoun College, so let's talk about that. You know, it should be called Thomas Jefferson, not a very nice person, elementary school. You know, because otherwise it just sits there and nobody ever talks about it. Hey, I just want to quickly switch gears. We're talking about breaking up with dead presidents. So, you were the one who sent us the ghosting thing, right? So there's something I had never actually heard of ghosting. So ghosting refers to the way in which, and apparently this was done by Charlize Theron to Sean Penn, rather than sitting down and saying, "Look, I don't think things are working out, and I don't want to see you anymore." You just stop communicating with the person, right? You could probably describe this better than I'm doing that.
Yeah, I did it recently. I went out on a couple dates with a guy, and it just became clear it was just not working. And I mean, I'm a generally I confront things, but with this, it just didn't even seem worth the energy. So every time he texted or messaged or whatever, I just ignored it until he went away. So, and you know, I realized it's not great. But then I saw this article online last week. Somebody had posted it, or I saw it on some site, and I realized, wow, I committed an act of ghosting. And it's a way to kind of not deal with things. But it is so weird in this world where we're all like constantly putting ourselves out there on social media, and then to just kind of try to disappear from one person.
Which is really hard.
Yeah.
It's such a great word, too. You know, like we never had a word for that phenomenon, but now we do. And I feel like that's why it caught on so quickly, because everyone knows what it is once you hear the definition.
And it was shockingly easy to do.
By the way, if you've ever ghosted someone or been ghosted or are troubled by the implications of ghosting, you may
Or
call
the
us.
guy I ghosted.
Or yeah.
He's on the
Or
phone now.
you can just ask Carolyn Payne one question. 860-275-7266. 860, yes, I mean, Carolyn's story that she was eaten by a shark has just exploded. She's here on the air. We're live. 860-275-7266. Never try to fake your own death and then go on public radio. It's just more. And you may also tweet to us at WNPR Colin. So the term is already entering the polling lexicon, writes the New York Times. In October 2014, a YouGov Huffington Post poll, maybe not the best use of their resources, of 1,000 adults showed that 11% of Americans had ghosted someone. A more informal survey from...
Admitted to it anyway.
Yes. A more informal survey from Elle magazine that polled 185 people, probably Elle readers, found that 16.7% of men and 24.2% of women had been ghosts at some point in their lives. So... we have to think about this. Did you have a question for Carolyn?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just...
Would you like to ask Carolyn why she didn't just tell this guy to beat it?
I think it's interesting. That was surprising that there's more women that did it than men, because it seems like men are notorious for doing that.
Yeah, but women also don't like don't like confrontations.
Well, that's true. It comes from not liking confrontation. I'm also thinking about the person who's ghosted and how people create so many fantasies about why they've been ghosted. You know, well, Carolyn, she must be afraid. It was so good that she's afraid of intimacy. Or, you know, she really loves me, but, you know, and there's just such an industry of people creating.
See, I've left him with all of these possibilities that he can think of rather than just being like, dude, you were a tool. Like,
I'm not that into you.
You've really been kind to him.
Yeah, so you'd like to, let him think whatever he wants. And poor Sean Penn, can you imagine?
Just
Sean Penn thinking.
Just think how hard this would have been if before we had all of these communication things and it was just the hardwired home phone, and like maybe before even answering machines, so somebody would have answered the phone, right? And then you'd have to.
Yeah, it was so awkward.
It's so awkward, right? Yeah, the awkward silence, right?
Well, I mean, so Anna Sale, formerly here of WNPR, now a big star at WNYC with the podcast Death, Sex, and Money, she was quoted in the story. She believes that social media enables the avoidance of difficult conversations. As people have gotten less and less comfortable talking face-to-face about hard things, it's become easier to move on, let time pass, and forget to tell the person you're breaking up with them. And did you just forget?
Just so that you all can understand, I am getting glares right now from everyone else in the room, and I know you're glaring at me from home.
We're glaring at you affectionately.
No, it's not that you forget. It is a choice. It's an active choice to every time you see the text or see the message or whatever, or see them call, you just are actively choosing, you know what? I'm just not dealing with this.
That into you.
It's kind of an argument for subtlety too, in a way that it's kind of like if you were like walked by the person on the street and you sort of, if you could be aware as the target of this, that you get the sense from that person's expression they don't want to talk to you. I mean, you can say that it's an analog of that in a way that if somebody is not replying to your messages, and
yeah, it's a don't call us, we'll call you.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's part of this. It's part of the new universe, if you like, of communication, that we have another means of doing it now, and so it's one way of doing it that avoids the direct confrontation, but also the explanation. Because the explanation is something that's really hard to do.
And I think there are different levels of ghosting. I committed moderate ghosting, where I didn't go to the extreme measures of like hiding them from seeing me on Facebook or something like that. Because I mean, it's stupid. I'm on the rate. They're gonna know I'm not dead. But there's the ultimate ghosting where people do. I actually read there was a story that broke earlier this year where a girl faked her own death just to get out of seeing this guy, and then a couple months after faking her own death went onto the dating website where she had met him, and he found her again, and
we covered
called
one
her
on the
out.
nose. The guy, I think it was the guy who was engaged, and he faked his own death. He was going to marry somebody in England
that's
or
right.
something like that.
Yeah.
We get a call from Laura in Cheshire. Hi, Laura. You're on the air.
Oh, you're going to be able to tell what age group I'm in that by the fact that I'm so upset about hearing the laughter. That you guys are laughing about this, and I think I'm hoping it's a reflection of some discomfort with ghosting. That it just, to me, it seems so disrespectful and demeaning to another person. If you're going to be out there meeting people and you see them, and talk to them and engage with them enough to find out that you're not really interested, I mean, that's the deal. And it just seems to me that a level of maturity, and again, as I say, this probably dates me, is to be able to say, you know what, I don't think we're on the same page. I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I don't think we're on the same page. And, let's go our separate ways.
Well, not only can I tell your age group, I can tell you're not Irish American.
Well, and also it does hurt someone's feelings if they want to be with you and you don't want to be with them. That's inevitable. So even if you say, well, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I'm breaking up with you, is that really any better than just kind of fading out? I mean, I don't know. It just... The hurt is there no matter what.
I feel like first of all, I have to say, as an Irish American and as who's been in relationships with other Irish Americans, I have actually had the conversation that semi-seriously but semi-joking, if you broke up with me, how would I know? Would I absolutely know that we were breaking?
The Irish goodbye.
Yeah, it's the Irish goodbye. So, sometimes Irish Americans are so uncommunicative about their emotions that you wouldn't even know that you were being broken up with. But I feel like there's a rule, right? There's this rule that I hate. That you have to sit down with the person and face to face and do, and I hate it.
Maybe it's only for baby boomers, that rule.
I so hate it. I mean, if I could get away with ghosting, if I didn't feel like I would be that I was violating this cosmic rule, I mean, I don't feel,
Why? What do you hate about it?
Because it's just like I hate all social awkwardness anyway. My feeling in Rosemary's Baby was the thing that made the movie so frightening was that at a certain point, Mia Farrow was going to have to acknowledge to her in-laws' face that they were demons, right? And it was going to be so socially awkward. I just would not want to have that conversation. I didn't really care anything else about what happened, like if they killed her or whatever. But just I hate that.
Ruth Gordon would have explained how to do that.
Right. All right, we have to stop anyway. We have to go. We have to have time for endorsements. So we'll move on. We'll be back after this.
I'm out of hiding.
Why has no studio greenlighted my screenplay for Squidicane? Today's show was produced by Colin McEnroe and me, Kyone Wolfe. Our interns are Alex Dubin, Deborah Timms, and Jules Lefebvre. Greg Hill appeared in the intro and tweets for us at WNPR Colin. The part of Bill Curry was played by Mark Cuban. For show pages, articles, and videos of the Faith Middleton Show staff making manatee soup, visit our website, WNPR.org/Colin. On Monday's show, hey, stop kissing your chickens. And now, back to Colin.
Yeah, actually, we are going to talk about that on Monday, why you should not kiss your chickens, assuming you have chickens. But people like to sort of cuddle up with their pet chickens, and the CDC is warning them that's not a good idea. They're for eggs. They're not to be your friends. All right, so we have to move on to endorsements. Although before we move on to endorsements, I do have to say that Carolyn Payne is actually a very nice person. She wasn't in a long-term relationship with this poor ghosted man. That it was, I mean, we'd hate for people to emerge from this conversation thinking that Carolyn is anything other than Well, never mind. We'll just move on.
It's all right.
You're a fine, upright person. And well, to the person who said we're laughing, well, I mean, we laugh about all kinds of things, right? We probably laugh about the things that do make us the most uncomfortable. So that's probably why we were laughing. All right, time for endorsements. Irene Papoulis, you get to go first.
All right, so I'm just into picnics this summer, and I recently went to it, and so I want to endorse picnics, but I went to the Mass Confusion was at Elizabeth Park, and I just love the name of that band because it's like Massachusetts and Connecticut fusion. I had never heard of them before, but they were a wonderful band. But calling up Tangiers beforehand, that store called Tangiers, and saying 4 falafels in 10 minutes. And they said, okay, great. And we went there, and they had wrapped up these 4 falafels, and we didn't have to worry about what am I going to bring, And then we got some of that sour cherry juice that's so good that they have there at Tangiers. They've got fantastic hummus. And it was a one-stop shop for a wonderful picnic at Tangiers, Farmington Avenue in Whitney.
All right.
Hartford.
Greek woman endorses Greek food.
I would
Dog
agree
bites
with that,
beast.
actually. Yeah, definitely.
All right, James, you get to go next.
A couple of books. One that I just loved about Berlin immediately after World War II called Leaving Berlin, a spy thriller by Joseph Cannon that is absolutely...
He's a friend of mine. That's actually true, yeah.
It's an amazing book. It's elliptical writing that makes you sort of check carefully what you're reading, and very rewarding read that I couldn't stop. And I actually started reading it again right afterwards to just sort of get the details of the story. Great book.
Wow.
The other book that's been absorbing me is Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me, which is kind of like a manifesto about race and slavery and his sort of, view of the world. It's really an extraordinary piece to read. It really makes me think, and it's another book I can't put down. Really revealing book and so heartfelt, and it's written in the form of a sort of a letter to his son. He's a really extraordinarily insightful person, I think, coming along at just a time when we're really, I hope, starting to deal with these complicated issues of race.
All right. I have a feeling that Caroline and I are going to be co-endorsing something today, but let's see.
I think so, yeah. I am endorsing the amazing Amazon. It's on Amazon Prime. It's a British sitcom co-written by Sharon Horgan and
Rob Delaney.
Thank you. I couldn't think of his last name. Rob Delaney. It is brilliant. It's funny. It has these great tender moments. It's called Catastrophe. There's just 6 episodes. They're currently filming a 2nd season. So definitely just check that out on Amazon Prime. It's wonderful, and I know Colin's a big fan too.
Yeah, so the premise is that this American businessman, advertising guy, is over in London, meets a woman. They have like a 1-week or 5-day or something torrid affair, and then she discovers that she's pregnant.
And he does the opposite of ghosting.
Right, he does the opposite of ghosting. He comes back over and kind of offers himself as a form of support. And it's watching them in this very interesting way kind of work out. It's funny, but it's not hilariously funny. It's funny
has
at
some moments
times.
that, you'll laugh. And Sharon Horgan is just one of my favorite women in comedy, and I feel like she kind of just goes under the radar a bit. And if you want to really see some stuff, go backwards and watch Pulling, her show that was on BBC like about a decade ago.
There's a tremendous performance given by, I don't know the actor's name. He played Brutus in HBO's Rome, and then he played the bodyguard of Maggie Gyllenhaal in The Honorable Woman. And he plays this unusually blunt doctor who's just sort of always dispensing this horrible information in this very sort of deadpan, you should just accept this kind of way. All right, I'm going to endorse the movie Mr. Holmes, which is a movie the premise of the movie is that Sherlock Holmes is now 91, 92, something like that, living in the Sussex area and starting to lose his faculties. And he's befriended by a little boy, and he's trying to hold on to his faculties. I mean, he has something like Alzheimer's disease or something like that. And it's a movie, first of all, that is a little bit slow in pace, but I try not to let that bother me because I think we've all gotten way too accustomed to things that move too fast. And I just have to endorse, I mean, if anybody's going to give a better performance than Sir Ian McKellen did in this year, I can't even picture what it is. This is just a remarkable performance of what it's a rendering of what it would be like to be a brilliant man whose thoughts aren't working anymore. And if you're wondering whether it's a movie that you need to see on a big screen or not, first of all, wait until it comes to Trinity Cine Studio, of course, and you can see it properly. But it's just some of the sweep of the Sussex countryside and the white, I think it's Sussex anyway, you see the white cliffs of Dover at one point too, and just, and there's some interesting pictures pictorial things that are done to juxtapositions of beehives and sort of this other deteriorating thing that's happening to Sherlock Holmes. It is worth seeing on a big screen. But boy, McKellen, he is so good in this. Anyway, thanks very much for tuning in. Thanks to Irene and to Carolyn and to James, and we'll be back on Monday.
Vernon, I would have said that one. Avon, Farmington, yeah. On the radio. See you on the radio. On the radio, baby. You and me talking, laughing down on Carolyn McEnroe.
At the very end of the latest Sharknado, spoilers, the Sharknado sucks all the sharks back up and then puts them back into the sea. Turns out they were just lone sharks.